Pedestrian deaths are up in the U.S. Every 2 hours, someone walking is struck and killed. And in some of those crashes, unlicensed drivers are behind the wheel. Now, you may think those drivers end up facing serious charges, but unless drugs and alcohol are involved, that's often not the case. Al Jazeera's Patricia Sabga is here to explain, and that seems pretty shocking.
It is really shocking, Erica, especially when you consider that the Governor's Highway Safety Association projects that last year saw a 10% spike in pedestrian fatalities around the nation. That is the largest annual increase on record. But as producer Vito Formica and I discovered, a national backlash is building against reckless drivers who destroy lives. 30-year-old Victoria Nicodemus was an art curator living her dream in New York.
She was at the highest point. She was breaking through in her career. I felt she was in love. I felt that she was truly happy.
But everything changed on December 6th. Victoria was out Christmas shopping with her boyfriend on this Brooklyn street when an SUV drove into the crosswalk, jumped the curb, and struck her.
Take me back to that night.
I was settling down to my normal, boring Sunday evening, taking my shoes off when my son came running in, Frankie, to tell me, we have to go to Brooklyn immediately. It's very important. Something happened to Victoria. And I walked into the hospital and I said to Peter, what are they doing for Victoria? And Peter kneeled in front of me and said, Mommy, Victoria's dead. I started pounding my chest. I don't know why. I just needed to hit myself. I don't know why. It was just so painful.
Victoria's family returned to the scene of the crash.
Well, this is exactly the scene.
The man who killed Victoria, 39-year-old Marlon Sewell, was uninsured and driving on a suspended license for not paying child support.
The guy was unlicensed. The cops told me that he claimed he had a carbon monoxide leak in the car.
What were you expecting would be the minimum punishment?
I thought that he would be charged with manslaughter and go to jail for at least 10 years.
Instead, Sewell was charged with a low-level misdemeanor. Soon after the crash, the DMV reinstated his license. A Brooklyn prosecutor asked the court to suspend it again, arguing that Sewell admitted at the scene he may have felt lightheaded, and it was unclear whether it was safe for him to drive. But the judge refused, saying, "Why have you not charged the defendant with reckless driving?" Victoria Nicodemus's case is not exceptional. In fact, in cases where drugs and alcohol are not a factor, it's not unusual for drivers who kill or severely injure pedestrians to get off with little more than a slap on the wrist.
Were you shocked to learn that her case is not exceptional?
Dumbfounded. I literally was dumbfounded. It was shocking to me, first of all, that so many people died in the city of New York, either on a sidewalk or in a crosswalk, and that hardly anybody gets charged with anything more than a misdemeanor.
The Brooklyn District Attorney's Office would not comment on the case, which is still being investigated. A spokesperson told Al Jazeera, quote, "We work aggressively within the current laws to prosecute drivers who engage in criminal acts, which unfortunately is often difficult as the courts have established tough standards for such prosecution." New York State Traffic Safety Resource Prosecutor Joe McCormack has been dealing with reckless driving cases for 20 years.
Our criminally negligent homicide statute is worded exactly like many other states, but our court interpretations of that statute are dramatically more restrictive. They require a moral blameworthiness that doesn't appear in the statute.
But Victoria's family is advocating for a game-changing bill. Introduced last year in the New York State Legislature, it would bring felony charges against unlicensed drivers or those driving on a suspended license who seriously injure or kill someone.
It's up to me. This is the year that we're going to pass it into law.
New York State Assemblyman Walter MOSLEY co-sponsors the bill.
And that's why it's so imperative that we take on this bill and push it through so it can go to a vote before the Assembly and for the Senate and get on the governor's desk this year.
I work with families across the 5 boroughs who have been in situations like Victoria's family, and they want their day in court.
Caroline Samponaro is with New York City nonprofit Transportation Alternatives.
We watched Mothers Against Drunk Driving set a fire around the issue of drunk driving, and I think we're starting to see that happen with reckless driving.
A shift reflected in Vision Zero, a program aimed at eliminating traffic fatalities and severe injuries. Launched in New York 2 years ago, it has since been adopted by 14 other U.S. cities.
So we are working to advance.
LEAH SHAHUM is director of the Vision Zero network.
So we've got to send the message societally, culturally, through the law, through the media, that these actions that can kill and that can change lives and ruin lives do have impacts.
And I think this is the power of the sort of cultural change that's happening. We're watching it unfold as we speak, and it's families like Victoria's family that are brave and courageous enough to speak out, to push back against the status quo, that will make that change happen.
Running someone over is not an accident. It's not a misdemeanor. It's a homicide.
The suspect in Victoria's case has another court date on March 29th. That is one day after what would have been her 31st birthday. The Brooklyn's DA office told us prosecutors can bring additional charges at any time pending the results of the investigation. However, it's been nearly 4 months since the crash, and so far, that hasn't happened.
Such a powerful story, Patty, and really, it really is amazing to even think about that it would only be a misdemeanor. So what is the incentive, at least in New York State here, to have a valid driver's license if really there are no consequences if you essentially commit a crime like this?
Really, there are no consequences, it seems, except that you have to pay a fine. So while it may cost you monetarily, the fact of the matter is that if you're driving on a suspended license, you can pay your fines, you can often get your license back. Even if you don't have a license, you pay a fine, you get your license back. But there really is this backlash that is building nationally where people are getting fed up. And really, it's such a shock to people. When we talk to Victoria's family and when we talk to other people for this story, we found out again and again that often people don't even realize that it's a low-level misdemeanor charge unless they are personally affected by something like this.
Yeah, you heard Victoria's brother say that he was just dumbfounded by that. Now, are they garnering enough support to where they really think that they can push this through and create this law?
They are trying to push this through. They're trying to push this through. They certainly have support within the New York State Assemblyman. You saw Walter T. MOSLEY said that he's going to be pushing through this bill this year. But really, it's more of a cultural shift as well, because it's not just about changing the law. Now, one thing the Transportation Alternatives was pretty adamant about is that they think that the DAs have to be tougher. They think that they have to start prosecuting these cases more vigorously. But prosecutors say, when you take a look at the law, though, our hands are really tied because we have to show that there was some sort of moral incentive behind it, and that that's such a narrow interpretation that it makes it very difficult for them. But really, people want to see not only tougher laws and tougher prosecution, but they also want to see the cultural change. They really want to see basically people stand up and say, hey, pedestrians have a right to walk in a crosswalk without somebody turning into them. They shouldn't have to jump back when they have the right of way. And they want pedestrian rights to really come to the fore.
All right, Patricia Sabbath, thank you so much for shining a light on a really important topic. Thank you.